Billionaire's secret forced me to become his daughter. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, wondering if my life would ever amount to more than this. The hum of the city outside my window was relentless. Car horns blaring, sirens wailing, the muffled sound of late-night arguments. It was as if the world was moving at breakneck speed while I remained stuck in place, trapped in a cycle that offered no way out. I was Jason Wells, a name that meant nothing to anyone. Just another nobody, scraping by in a city that chewed people up and spat them out without a second thought. My days were spent bouncing between dead-end jobs, my nights locked in a tiny, one-room apartment that smelled like mildew and regret. At 23, I had no future, no family, and barely enough money to keep the lights on. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was strong enough to survive, but surviving wasn't living. I used to have dreams. When I was younger, I imagined a different life, one where I belonged somewhere, where I didn't feel like a mistake. I would look at people who seemed so comfortable in their skin and wonder what that felt like. There was something inside me, something I could never name, a nagging sense that I wasn't meant for the life I had. But dreams didn't pay rent, so I buried those thoughts deep, convincing myself they didn't matter. At least, that's what I tried to do. The truth was, I hated the reflection in the mirror. It felt like a mask, like something I had been forced to wear rather than something that was truly mine. I avoided looking too long, afraid of the unease twisting in my stomach, afraid of the questions I had never dared to ask myself. I kept my head down, worked my shifts at the diner, and told myself that this was enough, that I was fine, until the night he walked in. A man in a perfectly tailored suit, the kind of wealth and power clinging to him that made people step aside without him needing to ask. He wasn't a regular. He wasn't supposed to be here. But the moment his eyes landed on me, something changed. I didn't know it then, but this was the night everything in my life would shift. This was the night I learned the truth about who I really was, and who I was meant to become. The man in the suit didn't belong in a place like this. The diner was a graveyard for lost souls, truckers stopping between hauls, drunks nursing their regrets, night shift workers too exhausted to care. But this man was different. He sat in the corner booth, his piercing gaze locked onto me like he'd been looking for me his entire life. I tried to ignore him, focusing on wiping down the counter, but when I finally walked over to take his order, he spoke my name before I had the chance. Jason Wells. I froze, fingers tightening around my notepad. No one here knew my full name. Most people barely noticed me at all. "Do I know you?" I asked, my voice more defensive than I intended. The man studied me, his expression unreadable. "Not yet." He slid a business card across the table. Victor Lancaster. The name meant nothing to me, but something in his voice, calm, controlled, expectant, sent a ripple of unease through my chest. I didn't pick up the card. "Look, if this is some kind of—" "I knew your mother." The air seemed to vanish from the room. My mother. A woman I had never known. A woman who had abandoned me at birth, or so I'd been told. "You're lying," I said, forcing a laugh. Victor's jaw tightened. "I have proof." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside were photographs, grainy, old but unmistakable. A young woman with dark hair, soft eyes that looked just like mine. My stomach twisted. There were hospital records, a birth certificate, and then, at the very bottom, a DNA test. I swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" Victor exhaled, his voice dropping lower. "To tell you the truth, about who you really are, and what you were meant to be." Something in his tone made the hairs on my arms rise. This wasn't just about my past. This was about my future, and it was about to change forever. I should have walked away. I should have left Victor Lancaster sitting in that diner with his folder full of lies and his expensive suit that didn't belong in a place like this. I should have told him I didn't care about my mother, about the past, about whatever fantasy he was trying to sell me. But I didn't. Instead, I found myself sitting in the back of his sleek black car, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. My hands were clenched into fists, my stomach twisting into knots. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "To your new home," Victor said, staring straight ahead. "There's a lot to discuss." I wanted to argue, to say I had a home, but the truth was, my so-called home was a one-room apartment that smelled like mold and desperation. And something inside me, something terrifying, something I couldn't name, wanted to know more. Victor's estate was nothing like the world I knew. The driveway alone was bigger than my entire neighborhood, and the house, no, the mansion, loomed over me like something out of a dream I wasn't supposed to have. A woman was waiting for us at the entrance. Tall, elegant, dressed in a black suit that screamed authority. She regarded me with an unreadable expression, then turned to Victor. "So this is the heir?" He nodded. "Eleanor, meet Jason." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "For now." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Victor exhaled, rubbing his temples. "There's something you need to understand. The world, my world, is built on perception. For years, everyone believed I had a daughter, a child I lost. My business, my legacy, everything is tied to that story." He met my gaze. "The world cannot know I have a long-lost son." I went cold. "What are you saying?" Victor didn't hesitate. "I'm saying you need to become her." Silence stretched between us. A thick, suffocating silence. Then I laughed, sharp and humorless. "You're insane." Victor didn't flinch. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I also know you're not happy, Jason. I know you felt like something in your life was missing." I clenched my jaw. "That doesn't mean I want to play dress-up for you." "You wouldn't be playing dress-up," Eleanor said coolly. "You'd be reclaiming who you were meant to be." I scoffed. "And what exactly does that mean?" Victor hesitated before answering. "Your mother named you Jessica at birth." The words hit harder than they should have. I wanted to laugh them off, to throw them back in his face, but my breath caught in my throat. Jessica. The name curled inside me, foreign and familiar all at once. I shook my head. "No, that's ridiculous." Victor stepped closer, his voice gentler now. "I see the way you look at yourself, Jason, like you're wearing someone else's skin." He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm giving you a choice. You can walk away right now, go back to your life, and never hear from me again. Or you can try, just for a while, see if this fits." I wanted to tell him to go to hell, but I didn't, because deep down, a part of me was screaming to know what if. The next morning, Eleanor brought me into a massive walk-in closet, bigger than my entire apartment, filled with designer clothes, neatly organized by color and style. "This is absurd," I muttered, arms crossed. Eleanor ignored me. "We'll start with the basics." She plucked a soft blouse from the rack and handed it to me. "Try this." I stared at it like it might bite me. "No." She sighed. "Fine. Baby steps." She pulled out a silk robe and tossed it at me. "Put this on." I hesitated, but eventually, I shrugged off my old hoodie and slipped into the robe. The fabric was impossibly soft, smooth against my skin. I looked in the mirror, and for a split second, something inside me shifted. Eleanor watched me carefully. "You don't have to decide everything today. Just take small steps." I swallowed hard. Small steps. Over the next few days, Eleanor pushed me further. Manicured nails, subtle makeup, softer clothes. Every time I protested, she would raise an eyebrow and ask, "Then why are you still here?" I didn't have an answer. Because every time I took a step forward, it felt less wrong than I expected. One night, I caught my reflection and realized my posture had changed, softer, more fluid. I wasn't just mimicking Jessica. I was becoming her. And that terrified me more than anything else. I thought I was making progress. I thought I was in control. But then came the dinner party. Victor insisted I attend. He said it was time to introduce Jessica to the world. Time for me to step beyond the private lessons, the makeup tutorials, and the carefully curated wardrobe. "This isn't a game," Eleanor warned as she helped me zip into an elegant black dress. "These people will tear you apart if you slip up." No pressure. I stared at my reflection, my heart hammering. The girl in the mirror was flawless, shoulders back, hair swept into an elegant updo, lips painted a soft, deceptive pink. But my skin burned with unease. I wasn't ready, but there was no turning back. Underscore 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 underscore. The moment I stepped into the grand ballroom, I felt it, the weight of 100 eyes, their gazes slithering over me like cold hands. I forced myself to glide forward, clutching my champagne flute as if it could anchor me. Jessica, darling, it's been so long. A woman I didn't recognize swooped in, pressing air kisses to both my cheeks. I froze. She knew me, Jessica, but I didn't know her. Victor was at my side in an instant, his hand a reassuring presence on my back. Jessica's been abroad for years, he said smoothly, covering for me. The woman, Margaret? Miranda smiled, but her eyes lingered on me too long, as if searching for something that wasn't quite right. I barely made it through the next hour. Every conversation was a test, every glance a threat. My voice wavered, my hands trembled, and with every passing second, I felt like a fraud. Then came the real disaster. I excused myself to the powder room, desperate for air. My breath was shallow, my pulse erratic. I can't do this. I can't be her. I turned on the faucet, splashing cold water onto my face. My makeup smudged slightly, and for a second I saw myself, Jason, staring back. The illusion cracked. That's when I heard them. 2 women whispering near the sinks. She looks different, one said. Something's off. She's stiff, the other agreed. Almost like she's faking it. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. They saw it. They knew. I stumbled out of the restroom, my vision blurred. I needed to leave, but then Victor was there, his grip firm on my wrist. Breathe, he ordered. I shook my head. They know. I'm not. You are. His voice was steel. They only suspect because you doubt yourself. I wanted to scream at him, to rip off the suffocating dress and run. But deep down I knew he was right. I had to believe it. I had to be her. So I lifted my chin, adjusted my smudged lipstick, and stepped back into the ballroom. This time, I didn't just pretend. I became Jessica. And when I smiled, they smiled back because they finally believed it too. But inside, the battle was far from over. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of the vanity mirror, staring at my reflection, at Jessica. The face was still mine, but different. The angles softened by delicate makeup, the posture no longer hesitant, the eyes no longer haunted. For weeks, I had fought against this, against the idea that I could ever be her. But tonight, something had shifted. I had survived the dinner party. I had walked into a room full of powerful, ruthless people and made them believe. And the strangest part? I believed it too. A slow exhale escaped my lips. I reached up, pulling out the pins in my hair, letting the soft curls tumble past my shoulders. My hands no longer trembled as they traced the silk of my dress. I stood, turning side to side, watching the way the fabric moved with me, not as a disguise, not as a costume, but as a second skin. For the first time, it didn't feel like I was playing a role. It felt like I had finally stepped into the person I was meant to be. The next morning, Eleanor watched me carefully as I entered the study where Victor waited. Something in her sharp gaze flickered approval, amusement, but she said nothing. Victor, however, saw it immediately. His eyes swept over me, assessing, before a small smile touched his lips. You've made a decision. I nodded. Yes. His fingers tapped against the desk. And I lifted my chin. I want to continue. No hesitation. No wavering. Eleanor smirked, crossing her arms. I told you, she murmured to Victor. It was only a matter of time. Victor exhaled, his expression unreadable. You understand what this means, Jessica. The name sent a ripple through me, not of fear, but of recognition. Yes, I said simply. I do. Victor stood, stepping toward me. His hand rested lightly on my shoulder, a rare gesture of warmth. Then let's begin. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't pretending. I was her. I never expected to feel whole. For weeks, I had told myself that this was a game, a role I was forced to play. But somewhere along the way, Jessica had become real. She wasn't a mask. She wasn't a lie. She was me. And now it was time to prove it. The gala was Victor's world. Powerful men in sharp suits, women draped in jewels, conversations laced with hidden agendas. It was the final test, the moment where Jessica Lancaster would be seen, judged, and accepted. Or exposed. I stood in front of the grand staircase, my pulse steady, my heart calm. The deep crimson gown clung to me like a second skin, the heels no longer foreign but an extension of my confidence. I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror, poised, elegant, undeniable. Victor offered his arm. "Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate. I was born ready. The crowd turned as we entered. The room hushed for a brief, breathless second before conversation resumed. But I felt their eyes, their curiosity. "She's back. The lost Lancaster daughter has returned." A man approached, his face vaguely familiar. "Jessica," he said smoothly, offering his hand. "It's been years. You've grown into quite the woman." His words were a test. The old Jason would have crumbled, second-guessed run. But Jessica, she smiled, took his hand, and met his gaze without fear. "Haven't we all?" she replied, her voice effortlessly smooth. The man chuckled, seemingly satisfied. Others followed, offering polite greetings, engaging in idle chatter. They believed it. They believed me. And more than that, I believed myself. Then I saw her. The woman from the dinner party, the one who had suspected me. She stood near the bar, her lips curled in amusement as she studied me. She approached, her champagne glass tilted in a lazy swirl. "So," she murmured, "are you enjoying your second chance, Miss Lancaster?" My fingers tightened around my own glass, but I kept my face serene. "I suppose I am." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "You certainly wear it well. Almost too well." A test. Another moment to shatter. But I didn't falter. Instead, I laughed softly, tilting my head. "You know, people change in time. Or perhaps they simply become who they were always meant to be." Something flickered in her gaze, recognition, grudging respect. She took a sip of her drink. "Well," she murmured, "welcome back, Jessica." She walked away, leaving me standing there. Accepted. Seen. Whole. And as I turned, catching my reflection in the polished glass, I saw the truth. Jessica Lancaster was no longer a secret. She was real. She was me. The days that followed felt different. Lighter. Freer. For the first time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for someone to call me a fraud. I no longer flinched at my reflection, no longer second-guessed my every word, every step. Jessica was here to stay, and the world accepted her. Victor watched me across the breakfast table, his usual calculating gaze replaced with something more, satisfaction, maybe even pride. "You handled yourself well last night." I took a sip of my coffee unfazed. "I know." A chuckle rumbled from his chest. "Confidence suits you, Jessica." It did. Even Eleanor had softened toward me, not that she'd ever admit it. She handed me a tablet with the morning's headlines. "You made the papers?" I glanced down. Jessica Lancaster stuns at gala, the return of a lost heiress. There was no mention of doubt, no whispers of scandal. Just recognition. Jessica Lancaster was real. And she wasn't going anywhere. That afternoon, I stepped onto the balcony, letting the sun kiss my skin. The weight I had carried for so long, the fear, the shame, the uncertainty was gone. I had spent my whole life running from who I was. Now I had arrived. A soft knock sounded at the door. Eleanor poked her head in, her usual smirk in place. "Victor wants you to review the quarterly reports." I raised a brow. "Me?" She leaned against the doorframe. "You're part of this family now, aren't you?" A slow smile spread across my lips. Yes. Yes, I was. And for the first time, that thought didn't scare me. It thrilled me. I wasn't Jason anymore. I was Jessica Lancaster. And the world was mine to conquer. For most of my life, I thought identity was something you were given, a set of rules you had to follow, a mold you had to fit. But I was wrong. Identity isn't assigned. It's discovered. Becoming Jessica wasn't about deception or playing a role. It was about stepping into the person I was always meant to be. It was about shedding fear, about choosing myself despite the doubts, despite the whispers. And that's the truth most people are too afraid to face. We are not bound by who we were told to be. We get to define ourselves. We get to become who we are. And when we do, we don't just survive, we thrive.